Hey, it's Kevin from KDW Mixing and Mastering. This week I thought I'd take my previous video where I was showing how I was using waves in phase to get my drums in phase and sounding nice. I thought I'd expand on that and try something else. Some people suggested that I try some of the automatic tools, which I was happy to do. I've been having a play with that a little bit. I wanted to trial again the Sound Radix, I think it's called, but I think I must have previously tried it a long time ago, and with my current account it wouldn't let me do another trial, so I couldn't be bothered. I watched videos and everything else, and to be honest with you, it confused me a little bit, and I wasn't really impressed just watching the videos and that. So, and also the price is a lot more expensive. So what I decided to do was concentrating more on the Melder Auto Align product that they have. So what I thought I'd do in this video is I was going to try 3 tactics. So the first one I'm going to try is I'm going to run through the process of trying to get my drums in phase and do it manually. Okay, so I'm going to use no plugins to do it. I'm just going to look at the waveforms and I'm going to try and do the process. Then I'm going to do the same process again, and I'm going to use the Waves in Phase product. And then after that, I will do the last step, which is to use the Melder product, which is more of an automatic tool, and use it. And then I thought what I'd do is compare the results of them. That's why I have created these folders. So in these folders, I have duplicated all the tracks. So I have one set of drums playing the same thing. They're identical. There is no plugins on any of these whatsoever. These are straight tracks. The only thing that I have done so far is I have sent these 3 kick tracks to a bus or a group, whatever you want to call it, just for convenience. And I've also done this with the snare top and side. But everything else is just going straight out, and every other one is identical. Obviously this one here I've got a different group track just so that it's getting sent to a different group, same with the snare, but they're set up absolutely identical with no plugins, no processing, no nothing. These are purely raw tracks. So at the moment I have this group and this group muted, and I have only got the manual group open. So to give you a listen to what we're talking about, this is what we have. So that's what we have. And to even show you, I've color coded these just so we can see the groups pretty obviously, but I'll show the mix window. I have all of the faders are set to 0, so I've done nothing with the faders. I have panned tracks a little bit, so the overheads are just stereo. The kicks are sending to a mono group, straight down the center. Snares, mono, straight down the center. Toms, tom 1 bit to the left, tom 2 bit to the right, tom 3 more to the right, and the hi-hat a little bit to the left. And that's it. So let's start with the manual process. Now, what I'm going to do is, obviously there's different ways to work here of what you want to be the primary. I like to work with a track that contains all of the drums, alright, because it's going to be there. And so in this case, it's the overheads. So the first thing I'm going to do is with the overheads, it's a stereo track, okay? So I'm going to first off find a hit here, and I'm going to zoom in. Let's zoom in a bit. So what I'm looking for here is I'm just going to check the left and right channels to see how they look and whether they look like they're in phase. So to me, if I was to me they look pretty much in phase. I mean, you could move one channel a tiny bit, but it's very, very fine. To me, it's very close. And, you know, true to being a manual process, I would not adjust this, because the trouble to separate this and adjust it, I just wouldn't do it. Not for that. You know, it's minuscule. It's nothing. So, to me, the overheads, they look like they're in phase. And that's what they sound like. Okay. Okay, so the next step I'm going to do is, now I start to compare everything to the overheads. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the kick. And I'm going to pick my primary kick drum. So out of all these, I'm going to say the kick in is the drum I want to compare. So if we listen to the kick in by itself, this is what we get. Alright, so we're going to compare that now to the overheads. So again, what we need to do is find a nice hit here. Okay, so when I look at this, to me, it looks like it's out of phase, and also it's a little bit off timing wise. So the easiest thing to do here is, let's put it in, let's start, first off, let's do the simple thing. Let's put it in playback. So we're going to compare the overheads with the kick in. This is what we have. Now I'm going to go to process, and I'm going to phase reverse the kick in. If I just undo that while it's playing, and redo it again, just undo it again. A redo again. So to me, I'm not sure if you're hearing it, but I'm hearing it. I'm hearing a lot more impact, a lot more low end on the kick that's coming out. So to me, that's exactly what we needed to get done. Now if we zoom in, because I've done that manually, here is what we have. So now if you wanted to, you'll see that the timing alignment is not 100%. So what we can do is, I'm going to turn snap off just so we can get this, and I'm going to nudge. I'm going to do it manually though, I'm not nudging it as such. And I might try and go to the peak. Yeah, now see, this is where it gets tricky, because the start of the waveform you would think is there, which you would line to there. Okay, but when you look at the peak of this waveform here, you would have put it more there, and the peak of that one there. See, it's a totally different shape waveform, so I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but let's do an experiment. Okay, so let's get it back to our normal spot. Okay, this is where it is now. And I'm going to move it to line up to this line while it's, right, oh, let's play it for a second. Now let's move it across, and let's see what we get. just undid the move. I'm going to redo it now. Undo again. Redo. And undo. Okay, to me, it's very subtle, but I'm liking it where it was. Just, it's sounding a bit better to me. I hear a little bit of loss of low end when I was moving it. Okay, so I'm happy with the kick and the overhead together now. Now, the next thing you might do is, you could do a mini orders here. We could do the snare with the overheads, but what I would like to do right now is let's get the kicks finished. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just compare each kick to each kick. Okay, so I'm going to compare now the kick out to the kick in and get those to be right. So I'm going to zoom in, and again you'll see here these were obviously in phase with each other before, but because we have reversed the phase of the kick in, we now have the kick out of phase. So we need to first off reverse the phase so it looks like that. And we can clearly see here that we could move the waveform again and tuck it back, but let's have a listen now. Let's just undo that phase. No, I mean that's just absolute night and day. You can hear that totally out of phase. Let me redo that phase reversal. And all the low end comes straight back in. Now, let's see what happens now if we adjust this waveform. And just tuck that back in there. And let's see how that sounds. Let me just undo that move. And redo. Let's undo. Redo. Now. So I actually like the sound of it better with it not adjusted. And again, you know, you can see it's not perfect because some spots it looks closer than others, and it's just to do with the placement of the mics, how far away they are, etc. So let's scroll down to this other one, which is a sub kick. So if we turn that one on, you know, we can see that it's out of phase again because they were obviously all in phase, and me flipping the phase to get them aligned with the overheads has put them all out of phase. So, you know, it should be pretty obvious when I listen to this. It's going to sound thin. And then I'm going to phase reverse. And suddenly, so if we undo, very thin, redo, thump, lots of low end, and then we add the overheads in. Plenty of low end there. No issues whatsoever. So now I'm going to turn off the kicks. So the kicks are all good now. I'm happy with the kicks. I'm just going to scroll this up just so I can see what I'm doing for a second. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually move this snare top. I'm just going to take it up here at the moment. I'm going to solo it. And we're going to zoom in. So I'm doing this because, again, I'm going to go back to comparing this to the overheads, which was my source. Okay, and we're going to have a look. So when I look here, to me it looks like it's in phase. It's obviously in a different line, but let's remember the results we had before with the kick. So let's prove the point with this. So this is what we sound like straight. Now I'm just going to phase reverse that, just to have a listen. Going to undo that. Now, yep, redo. Undo. Yep, I can hear a lot more thickness without the phase reversal, so you can see that there's no need for the phase reversal on this one. Okay, but so let's try the moving of the waveform. Okay, so to me that looks, so I've just moved that waveform, that looks like it's pretty close to being in line. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like now. Now let's undo that. Let's undo. Redo. Let's undo. And redo. In this case, I'm actually liking it with it lined up. Again, it's subtle. The movement of the timing is a lot more subtle than the actual phase adjustment, but I'm liking that a bit better. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that back, and now we're going to line up the two snare drums. So we're going to have a look, and we're going to see that, to me, they look like they're in phase, but one of them, this one here, is slightly back, so we could move this in, move that in a bit so it looks like it's closer, maybe a little bit back. Alright, okay, so let's see what that does with the adjustment in place. Let's undo. Redo. Undo. And redo. I can't really hear any difference, to be honest. It's very subtle. I'm going to leave it with the adjustment in there. Obviously I would adjust the levels of this, you know, the side snare there. It's not making the snare sound very good. I would drop it down a bit, it's a bit too loud. So that's the snare. Let's play it and then add the overhead in. Sounds nice. Okay, so let's turn the overhead off. Let's do it with the snare and add the kick in now. So in theory, because we've aligned the kick to the overheads and we've aligned the snare to the overheads, we should be safe to assume that the snare should be lined with the kick. Let's have a listen. So what I'm listening for is, so to give you an idea, when I've got it like this, I'm listening to the snare drum. When I activate the kick drum, I'm still listening to the snare drum, and I'm listening to see if I hear any major changes, any thinning or anything like that. If it sounds fundamentally the same, then I know it's good. And then what I do is I do the opposite, and I actually mute the snare, listen to the kick and add the snare in, and listen to the kick drum to see if it changes fundamentally. And to me, it sounds great. All right, let's move on to toms. So I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit and see if we can do all three toms at once. So let's find a little tom run. We've got a tom run here. So when I say do them at once, I'm going to do one at a time, but I just want to line them up together to see. Okay, so we can see, it's obviously, let's blow it up a little bit. It goes down then up. So to me, it looks like it's in phase. We could confirm that. It could be moved back a little bit. So you can see there, we could move that back. So let's do that. Just move it back a little bit. So we're just listening to tom 1 with the overhead. Let's undo it. Redo. Very subtle. I like it. I think it's working. I don't mind, that little move is working fine. Okay, now let's have a look at tom 2. Now we can move it above if we want to. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to go to this second one because that one's blurred a bit by that one. And let's have a look. It's very hard to see. Let's see if we can find something that's a bit better. Let's try this one here. That one's a bit more obvious. Okay, so let's have a look. Again, looks like it's in phase. Could be sneaked back a little bit. Out there, yep, that looks good. Take it back here. Undo. Redo. Sounds good with the move. I'm happy with that. Let's put that back down and let's get tom 3 up here. Let's find one here. And again, we could just tweak it back a little bit like that, like so. And let's have a listen to that. Undo. Redo. Again, sounds nice with the move. I'm happy with that. Now, just for comparison, let's scroll that back. Let's have a listen to, what am I looking for? Looking for a bit of a run here. So let's have a listen. So we've got this with the overheads on. Well, let's listen without the overheads first. Let's just see how they react with each other. Add the overheads. Now the only other drum on this one is the hats. Right, so let's move the hats up. The overheads. Okay, let's... Alright, well, I need to have a look. So, what are we listening for here? Let's listen to the hi-hats and see what they actually sound like. So that's a nice hi-hat hit there. So to me, it's in phase. Could be brought back a little bit to there. It's hard to see. Let's see. We got something a bit bigger. That's a pretty good hit. But how much is in the overhead? See, that's... You're seeing a lot of snare on that one. So it's probably not a good example, that one. That's really the best hit there, I think. You know, I'm still hearing kick. So the problem is in the overhead, it's you're really going to have very little of the actual hat itself, and it's going to be mainly the kick or the snares because they're generally hitting the hats at the same time. So I think what I'm mainly going to do here is just have a listen, make sure that it doesn't sound funny. Maybe, I mean, it looks like it's in phase to me, so I'm not really worried about the phase. I think that's good. Actually, it looks fairly well lined up, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just have a listen. Again, I'm just listening to see if there's any negative impact on the overheads or the hats when I solo it in and out, to see if anything thins out too much, but it sounds pretty good to me. To me, right now, our manual drums are set, and this is what they sound like right now. And remember, the faders are all set to 0. Now, if I was mixing this properly, I would start tweaking these levels and dropping some of these, you know, adjusting my kicks to get the sound I want, adjusting the snare so I was getting the sound between the top and the side or bottom, depending on what you've got. And obviously reducing the hats, they're a bit loud. Now that we have treated our drums, let's have a listen between untreated drums and the treated drums. So we've got our manual drums here that we've just got the phase right and, you know, done all the work. Either one of these groups here hasn't been touched, so they're the original drums. Okay, so let's switch between them and see what we can hear the difference. So particularly pay attention to the kick or the snare, see if you hear any massive differences between the two. So I'll switch between them. Let's start with the untreated drums. The difference between it is just amazing. It just shows how important it is to get the phase right. 80% of your work in mixing a set of drums is done by getting the phase right in this case. Instead of trying to fight the drums, trying to do lots of EQ moves and that to get these drums sounding nice, all we've had to do is get the phase right. So, obviously we can still do EQ, compression, adjust the faders as, to get our levels right on each of the individual drums to get them sounding nicer. But fundamentally, we've got the drums sounding a lot better just by doing that phase, which just shows how important it is. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's now do the in-phase version. So again, we're going to start with the same process, and we're going to use our overheads as our main track. So I'm going to put a stereo version of in-phase on because it is a stereo track. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just check the overhead. So I'm going to solo that. And we are going to, at the moment, I've got it set to channel 1, channel 2, so it's looking just at the overhead in stereo. And I'm going to play it and take a capture and have a look. So you'll see here from the correlation meter, it looks good. It looks like it's in phase. We can go in there and zoom in and have a look. Okay, and to me that looks spot on. Perfect. I wouldn't do anything with that. Okay, so now we're going to switch this over to our sidechain mode. So we've got channel 1, 2 of the overheads here, sidechain here. I'm going to put it in mono because I just like to wear it, and activate the sidechain. So we're going to start by comparing our kick to it. Okay, so we are going to send to the sidechain, turn it on. Now I put it in pre-fader, and the reason I put it in pre-fader is because this plugin plays the sound of the overheads plus the sidechain, which is the kick. And that's what we want to listen to while we're making our adjustments. So I put it in pre-fader because at the moment, if I press play, what we're hearing is we're going to hear the overhead and the kick coming through the plugin, and we're going to hear the kick coming through normally on its fader. Okay, that's what you're going to hear now. Okay, that's not what we want to hear because that is tainting what we're listening for. Okay, so naturally you would think, I'll take it out of solo. That I'm pretty sure works when you're using something like Pro Tools, but in Cubase it doesn't work because I'm assuming that this send is pre-fader, but the mute is pre-send that's pre-fader. Because with that muted now, and I press play, you'll see that there's no signal coming up on there. So that's an issue. So the way I get around that is I have to solo the kick. So the light's coming on now. The reason I set that to pre-fader is because now I'm going to turn the fader down. That seems to be the only way that I've managed to work out how to get this done efficiently, is to turn the fader down. Still have it activated in solo, or if you're not using solo, just not muted. And now you'll see it's flashing here, and what we're hearing is just what's coming through the plugin, which is the kick and the overheads. And we can prove that by, if we switch to A, we're hearing the overheads. Switch to B, we're hearing the kick. Stereo, we're hearing both, and then obviously mono, we're hearing both, but in mono. Okay, so now we're going to capture again. And straight away we look at the correlation meter, it's instantly telling us that the kick is out of phase to the overheads. And funnily enough, that's exactly what we worked out when we did this manually. So if I zoom in, you'll see that it's out of phase. It goes up first, whereas the overheads are going down. So first step I'm going to do is I'm going to click that and put it in phase. So before I do that, I'm going to copy A to B. So what we have now is we have original, unaffected, and then A, I'm going to switch the phase. So now we're going to play again, and I'm going to switch between A and B so you can hear the effect. Now, let's just have to switch both. Got to remember to switch both. Any settings you change on one, you got to change on both, or you'll throw your figures out. So I'll put it in stereo and we'll have a listen and see if that sounds any more obvious. So I'm hearing more low end with the phase adjusted, as you would expect. Now the other thing we can do here is you can see that it's not lined up. Okay, or it doesn't look like it's lined up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy that to B again. So now B has the phase adjustment. And now we are going to do a timing adjustment. But have a look at that. So when I do that to where you think it would be lined up, suddenly it says it's out of phase again. So the timing of this is not quite accurate because the placement of the microphones and how far they are apart is changing the waveform itself, as you can see there, right? So even though we get it to the start, you'll then see the peaks aren't lining up, and the dip there is very short as opposed to the dip on the kick here, which is quite wide compared to this. Okay, so it's entirely different sound. So we definitely don't want it to be going out of phase, that's for sure. So now what I would normally do is normally I would copy these settings, okay? Because it's just a phase reverse, we could just shortcut and just do the phase, but let's do the process properly. So I would copy AB, and then I would go onto my kick, because that's the one I'm going to adjust, and I would actually open in phase in mono, because the kick is mono, and I would paste the B setting up here, so you'll see with no adjustment, just the phase, and I would process it. Okay, then if we bypass this plugin, in theory we should have, and I bring the fader back up on the kick, we should have it nice and adjusted. Now I'll just undo that change to show you. And redo. So it's nice and thick. Because I'm using the Waves in Phase plugin here, I'm going to change tactics, not change tactics. I'm just going to skip the rest of the kicks for the moment, and I'm going to go straight to the snare. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to do a send to the side chain, put it pre-fader, Okay, it's going here. We're going to turn these settings off first. Let's get all these back to 0. Copy that to B. Okay, and we're going to turn our fader down on our snare. Just have a listen. So this is our overheads with our snare now, snare top. Okay, and now we're going to do a capture. Zoom out so I can find a hit. Okay, we have a hit here. It says it's in phase. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so there it is there. It's definitely in phase. Now it could be adjusted by this. Let's move this over. So in this case, let's have a look and see if I move that back. Does seem to get, the correlation seems to get a bit wider. Let's go back to there. So there it is there. Let's copy that to B. Okay, so we've got A and B are the same. Now on A, let's move that slightly back. So if you're just going for the widest, 17 seems to be the widest. Now we're not lining up anything here really. You could look at the peaks. The peaks are not bad there. But let's just have a listen and switch between the two with that setting. Sounds a little bit fuller. Let's copy that to B now. And then what I'm going to do is, let's have a look at what does it sound like if we move it even closer to the line. Okay, so now we've got it to the line. The correlation there has dropped down a bit. Let's switch between A and B again now. I'm not hearing a massive difference. To me, B sounds a little bit clearer. A might have a little bit more low end, but it also sounds a little bit muddy. But it's just very subtle. And I could just be tricking myself trying to listen for something. So I'm not going to go with that, but I am going to go with the B setting, which is where the correlation was shown as its highest. Okay, so it's there. So we're going to copy AB, and then I'm going to go onto my top here, open my process plugin in mono again. We're going to paste B, so yep, so we've got this new setting, and I'm going to process. And then we're going to bypass this plugin. We're going to put the fader back up and have a listen. I'll just undo it. And redo. Sounds nice and thick. Next, we can have a look at the tom. And we're going to do exactly the same process as we've done with every single other one. And I think some of this I'll speed up. So you'll see I'm going to do exactly the same. Okay, so we want to look here somewhere, zoom in, let's have a look at what we've got. Okay, so we can see the tom is slightly out. We take that setting off, it's even more out. That was the setting from the snare. So let's get that there. I'm going to now process that. Okay, then we're going to do the same for B. Let's get that back up. Okay, so that so out of whack it almost looked like it was out of phase. Okay, so copy AB. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I've done all of those to the overheads. I'm now going to take the plug-in off the overheads and I'm going to disable the overheads, and what I'm going to do is now concentrate on the kicks. So our kick in is our source, so I'm going to put a mono version of In Phase on here. Okay, and we are going to turn the sidechain on. Obviously we're in mono, so there is no option but just the sidechain version. We're going to switch over to the kick out, and we are going to get our sidechain going to there, put it pre-fader, turn the volume down, and let's play it, see if we can hear it. Make sure it's on mono. Alright, let's capture. Okay, we've captured, and as you can see, absolutely out of phase. And that's because we reversed the phase of the kick before. So let's see if we can get this zoomed in nicely. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is reverse the phase. Nice and thick now, and then we're going to bring that back to about there. Alright, we're going to copy that setting. And we're going to apply that to our kick out. And we'll put the fader back up. And then we're going to do the same for our sub kick. Let's just turn these settings off and do a zoom out, capture. Again, says it's out of phase. Let's just zoom in, confirm that, which it is. Let's reverse the phase and let's line it up. Okay, copy, and we will process that. Paste B, process, good to go. Fader back up. Let's unsolo that. Let's now remove that from there, and now we just need to do our snare. Okay, so snare, mono, no settings, side chain on. Let's go to our snare side. Turn that on. Turn that down. And it should be on mono. Let's capture. Okay, let's get a hit. It says it's out of phase. Let's zoom in, have a look. Yes, it is. Switch the phase. Get the line somewhere there. We move it out there. That looks good. Let's copy and go to our plugin, mono, and paste B and process it. Fader back. Take the plugin off. We've finished fixing our phase with the Waves in Phase plugin, and we've also done it with the manual. Let's compare the two and see what we get. There seems to be a bit of a difference with the snare. So let's have a listen and see what we're hearing different. Yeah, the snare sounds a bit louder in the Waves in phase one, but the hi-hat doesn't seem the best as it does in the manual. So we are going to place auto align on the overheads. Okay, that's our first step. We're going to put it on the overhead. And just so we're 100% clear, I'm going to set it to A. Okay. I'm also going to increase the delay just in case there needs to be more with the overheads. Alright, so in theory I could put this auto align on all the tracks and just go with it. Okay, but I'm going to do it one at a time and see what we get. So I'm going to solo those. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to open both of these. Okay, so they're both set to A. They've both got a high maximum delay. Now, the overhead is my main track, so I'm going to click that as my main track. I'm going to start playback, and I'm going to analyze. So it has decided that it needs to invert it, which would be consistent with our results so far, and move it 0.4 milliseconds. Okay, so that's good. So I saw another video online where somebody would be doing the analyzing 3 times, and they just keep doing it over and over again until they are happy with the result. So I'm going to do that just to see if it changes the result. I'm just curious, because to me it should be consistent. I'm not changing anything. So you would think that should be able to get the same answer most of the time. So let's see if it does. Okay, so it's adjusted some values there, but nothing major, just tiny little bit of a... So now that was a fair big move, that one. So I don't necessarily think I would trust that one. So we're back to that 0.6. It seemed to be averaging about 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 milliseconds there. So I'm happy with that 0.6. The main thing is the invert there. So the whole thing of the automatic process there is that it's done it, and I should be able to bypass. Okay, and that's fine. So it's doing what it's meant to do, and it sounds good. So the tricky part now is that do I continue to do my process, or do I follow the process that they say you should do? Now, you know, let's try the full-on automatic process. Now I can copy that one across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that to all of the kicks and all of the snares, toms and hats. Okay, so they're all on. So let's turn all the drums on. So I've put the auto align on all of the drum tracks because the whole point of this is it's an automatic process. I want to see if this can save me time. So I've put it on here. I've made the overheads the main track, and I'm going to analyze. Let's do it a few times to make sure that we get it consistent. Seems to be not moving. That's fine. So what I find annoying is that I put that to main track on the overheads, yet it is doing a movement of the overheads. Now, what's the point of ticking that as the main track? I don't know. To me, if I tick that as the main track, no adjustment should be made on this track. All the other drums should be moved or adjusted to fit that. But it's placed an adjustment on that. It's placed an adjustment on every drum for some bizarre reason, which I don't get. Okay, but let's bypass it. Let's have a listen between the two and see what we hear. So there's a massive difference there. So it is making a huge improvement. Now we could obviously process that, but I'm going to leave it as is at the moment, because all I want to do now is compare the three as it is. And then I'm just going to try some other stuff with the auto align, because I haven't done much with it and it is a new sort of tool that I'm trying. But just as I said, for a fair comparison, we've done the manual process as good as I would do. We've done the waves in phases as good as I would do. And the auto align, at the moment, I just wanted to do what I want it to do, which is the fastest approach. I put the plugin on every drum track and I go analyze. And it does what it does and I move on. So we will have a bit of a play with that in a moment to see if we can do it better. But I just want it to do it as automatic as possible. So let's have a listen to that and I will switch between them each. Okay, so to me, I'm hearing auto align and waves in phase. They sound pretty much the same. I'm hearing the manual approach sound quite a bit different. Now, this is where I guess taste comes into it. The snare is a hell of a lot thicker on the waves and the auto align than it is on the manual. The manual though seems to have a better sounding hat and it sounds a bit clearer. The whole drum kit sounds a little bit clearer and less muddy. Now that's obviously something that can be fixed with EQ and things like that. So there's a balance between getting it perfectly in phase and what you actually like it sounding like. Sometimes it actually sounds better to have a kick, not necessarily 100% in phase. Depends on what you're going for. So it's a bit of a taste thing. So they are working though. So the automatic process has worked and has saved a bit of time. I'm going to try taking the overhead version off, and I'm just going to do the close mics for the M-Audio Align and see what the difference is with that, what results we get. So I'm going to turn that one off. And what I'm going to do, whether it makes a difference or not, I'm going to make the kick in my main drum just for the sake of it. Okay, so now all we have is the Auto Align sitting on the kicks, snares, toms and the hats. I'm just going to switch it over to the other screen because what I want to do, so you'll see that's bypassed. I just want to quickly flick through these and have a look. So we've got 6.1, 5.7, 0 on the sub. No change on the sub whatsoever and not inverted. Why it chose that not to adjust is beyond me. The snare's 7.1, 6.9 on the other snare, tom 7.2, 7.3, 7, 6.3, and just out of curiosity, the original overhead was 5.7. So looking at all of those, for some reason, even though I had the overhead as the main track, it decided to do nothing with the sub and leave it at 0, non-inverted, and then moved every other drum between 5.7 and 7 milliseconds to line them up. Now, I could understand that if I ticked the sub drum as the main track. So I don't know if it's a bug or it's the way it's meant to work. I just don't get it. Anyway, let's see what happens now when we do an analysis without the overheads in, which they do state in the manual can cause a problem. We're just doing the close mics now. Oh, 22.5 milliseconds. Okay, so now this is where I start to get concerned because we were fluctuating from 22 milliseconds to 7.3. We got 5.5 there, 5.5, 8.9. The top snare's been inverted. The side snare hasn't. It's 3.7. 126 milliseconds. I mean, that is just ridiculous. That's just not even sensible. I don't even know what this plugin is doing now. I'm going to take all of those off. So the problem I have, if I'm going to use an automatic tool, I want to know what it's doing. And right now, I have no idea what it's doing. I'm going to put this down to 10, right? Because that was its default setting. And clearly 10 milliseconds is probably what you should have for close mics. Now, I'm going to take it back to bare basics here, okay? Let's take the overhead off as well. So all I've got in is kick in, kick out. Okay? And I'm going to turn off this main track feature. So we're in default setting. I've got it grouped to A. And let's go. Okay, so we've got 1.3 milliseconds, 56 samples. Let's try it again. It's the same. Okay, so I'm happy with that. That to me is giving me reasonable results. It makes sense. Let's have a listen. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to follow my original process. Alright, and I'm not going to set any major thing there. So I'm going to go overheads and kick in. Alright, open both up. So I'm going to do them one at a time. I'm going to follow my manual process or my waves in phase process, but use auto align and not do the whole drum kit. Do one at a time and see what results we get. Okay, so we've got it in group A. So it's decided that it wants to invert. Well, okay. It's switching between which one it wants to invert. Again, what's its calculation? I don't know. If I set that to main, see, it's just switched again. So it keeps switching to which one it wants to invert. So with that set to main, let's see if it always stays as inverting that one. So this is what I would like to see. Nothing being changed on the main track. Which seems to be the case when I have one drum. Now, if I add the other kick and bring it in, does it stay the same? So suddenly it's left the kick out. Oh, it's inverted it, but it's left its delay. And now we're back to 0. So I don't know why it keeps switching. This is the main track, yet it keeps moving where it's doing its adjustments. So if we take that off, this seems to be a consistent figure here, okay? That's what it's doing. Let's switch over to here. So in theory, I should be able to go here and go render in place, create a new track. That should now have the settings on it. Get rid of that. So that should have the adjustments on it there. As an example, if I was to put auto align now on here and open the overhead one, okay, we set it to A. That's still set to the main track. That's the kick. This is the kick that's now been processed. still fluctuates. I'm not sure why. But we don't have the inverse setting coming up anymore, so it's confirming that's okay. It's talking 0.1 millisecond, 3 samples. All right, so you wouldn't even bother. So to me, that means that it has made the adjustment. Okay, so I've processed that track there. So then if I was to follow my other process, I would now do it on the kick out. So we will take auto align off there. We've got it on the kick in. It's now our main track. We're going to place it on our kick out. Alright, all the settings are right. Let's get rid of the overhead and let's analyze. So I've got the kick in set to main track. It wants to invert the kick out, makes sense, but it also wants to move the kick in. Why not put that figure over here? That's just frustrating me. Alright, anyway, I'm going to stop here. You heard examples. It did work. It did do its job. I'm just not convinced that I could rely on this automatic process because it just fluctuates so much. It's so inconsistent. It moves settings from one track to another track. It wants to invert one here. It wants to do this here. This main button, track button, I have no idea what it actually even does. Yeah, it's very frustrating. And considering it's supposed to speed up my workflow, if I just ignore it and just let it do what it does and trust that it does what it does, then yeah, it'll speed up my workflow. But if I want to make sure that it's doing the right thing, then I'm spending a lot more time than I need to. So I'm not convinced yet. I need to do some more research on it and find out what I'm doing wrong, or if that's just the way it works. If you've got this plugin and you know anything about it and you can inform me of what I'm doing wrong, then please leave some comments in the video, because I would love to find out. I would love to be able to have a tool like this. It's a very good priced tool. If it works, it would be fantastic for that price. But yeah, I need a bit more selling and a bit more information and some guidance from some people that maybe know how to use it properly. So anyway, thank you for watching and see you next time.